Welcome to Tar Heel Monsters, everybody. If you were directed here through a link on my other channel, Miss Lola's Hair and More, thank you so much for joining me. If you like my content, and I hope that you do, please subscribe, like, and share my videos. And don't forget to comment. Welcome to Tar Heel Monsters, everybody. What is it with these women who have these wonderful men who adore them and will do anything for them, and yet they betray them in a most salacious way? Mr. Bob, please tell us what happens in this story.
Yes, ma'am. In 1999, Monique Wheeler was living in Florida with her parents. Like most teenagers at the dawn of the internet age, Monique was drawn to online forums and chat rooms, which is where she met Marky Montgomery, a woman who lived in Ventura, California. The two were immediately drawn to each other. They traded a flood of instant messages, emails, and letters. A long-distance romance soon blossomed. After several months of talking, Monique flew out from Florida to California to meet Marky in person in April of 1999. Monique's visit confirmed her intense feelings for Marky. She told her she didn't want to live apart any longer. They wanted to be together, so Monique flew back home to get everything packed up. In just a few weeks, Monique started living with Marky in California. They had a symbolic commitment ceremony several months later. Though Monique's parents were concerned that their daughter had essentially married a woman she barely knew, Monique stayed with Marky for 6 months. In the spring of 2000, everything changed for Monique when she met Paul Berkley. Paul was a 40-year-old unemployed Navy veteran and divorced father of 2 who lived near the convenience store where Marky worked. Marky told Monique, "Paul seems like a nice guy, through our occasional, 'Hey, how's it going?' at the store." One night, the 3 of them met at the store by chance, and Marky introduced Monique to Paul as her wife. Paul, known as a bit of a wild man who was always the life of the party, invited them over to his apartment to hang out. Monique and Marky only spent a few hours at his place, but the next night when Marky got off work, she returned home to find that Monique wasn't there. All Marky found was a note with Paul's phone number. She called them a few times, but no one answered. Monique didn't come until the next morning and didn't offer much of an excuse. She said, "Well, I think I'm going to go stay with Paul." Monique's relationship with Paul moved just as quickly as it did with Marky. After a few weeks together, Paul took Monique to his ex-wife's house and introduced her to his kids. Paul had had several girlfriends in the past, so his children didn't think that much of 20-year-old Monique until he introduced her as their future stepmom. A year later, the two married, and despite their age difference, everyone was supportive because of how much more stable Monique was than Paul's previous girlfriends. After a few more years together, Paul re-enlisted in the reserves and started looking for additional work in programming. His children also eventually moved in with the couple. Paul's daughter Rebecca and Monique developed a close relationship. His family, and even his ex-wife, loved Monique. After a slew of not-so-stable girlfriends, they were glad to finally have Monique in the picture. She seemed to genuinely love him. Paul wanted to raise his children in a small, safe town, so when he got a job offer in 2003 to relocate outside Raleigh, North Carolina, he accepted and moved the family east. The children were going to school every day. Paul was working every day. Monique was staying home being a housewife, keeping the house immaculate, and cooking meals every night. She even helped the children with their homework. In 2005, Paul was deployed to Iraq and had to leave his family behind. Monique emailed him every day and struggled with him being gone. Paul left a pair of his jeans on the floor in their bedroom. Monique wouldn't let the kids move them to the laundry hamper because she wanted them to stay exactly where Paul had left them. While Paul was deployed, 2 teenagers, LaTuan and Andrew, began hanging out with Rebecca. Both young men had crushes on her and were vying for her affection in a sense, but remained best friends. Although LaTuan eventually began dating Rebecca, Andrew kept coming over the Berkley house. He unofficially moved in with the family by asking every time he visited Rebecca, "Can I stay the night?" Monique didn't seem to mind. She liked having Andrew around because it took her mind off missing Paul. 8 months later, Paul returned to North Carolina for a 2-week leave on December 14, 2005. He was excited to be reunited with his wife and children. His homecoming soon became awkward when Monique picked Paul up from the airport on the afternoon of Saturday, December 17, 2005. When Paul tried to kiss her lips, Monique turned her head and he kissed her cheek instead. When the family arrived at the house, Monique became cheerful and told Paul she had made romantic weekend plans for them, that they were going to spend a night at the movies before heading to the local park. Paul was anxious to spend time alone again with his wife after being away from her much too long. Later, at 3 a.m., Raleigh police receive a 911 call. Monique was in distress. She had been shot at the park.
Been shot? What's your address?
Nearly 3 minutes into the call, hearing an unsettling noise in the background, the dispatcher asked if someone else was injured. Monique Berkley said her husband had been shot too. At times, her pitched voice was barely audible above his grunts and growls as Paul struggled to breathe. Monique said 2 men had come up behind them, shot them, and fled. Emergency vehicles searched North Raleigh Millbrook Exchange Park for Monique and Paul with only her screams to help locate them. It took 15 minutes for emergency crews to finally arrive. They found Monique shot in the shoulder and Paul shot in the back of the head. They bandaged Monique's wound and desperately tried to save Paul's life. Later that morning at the hospital, the doctors took Paul off life support while Monique and his children were by his side. Meanwhile, detectives investigated the crime scene. An initial search revealed only .45 caliber shell casings and a picnic basket with wine and some candy in it. Paul's wallet wasn't missing, so it didn't appear to be a robbery gone wrong. The weather was also terrible that night, so police questioned why the couple would go to park at all. Monique gave her account of the evening, saying they went out to the movies, went to dinner, and then went to the park for a romantic picnic. When asked who might have known they were going to be at the park, Monique said Andrew and Latoan knew they were there. She told investigators that Latoan was her stepdaughter's boyfriend and that Andrew was a troubled teen who moved in. As the interview continued, however, Monique revealed she had been romantically involved with Andrew. She didn't intend to have a relationship with him, but with Paul gone and Andrew always around, things kind of just happened. Andrew was 18. She was 26. They were closer in age than she was with her 46-year-old husband, Paul. She tried to keep the affair secret, but eventually she confessed to Paul's daughter, Rebecca. She swore her to secrecy and had Andrew move out before Paul returned. A heavily sedated Monique continued to confess her affair. By the end of her interview, she ended up revealing a lot more than she anticipated. According to Monique, her romantic interlude with Paul was simply a way to set up an ambush. The plan was for her to be harmed so that it would divert police attention away from her. The 3 of them discussed shooting or beating her because she would have to meet with some physical violence to avoid suspicion of her involvement. When she became more lucid in the interrogation, Monique tried to amend her statement and said she went to dinner with Paul and started having second thoughts. She really loved him and decided to call it off. She left the movie to call Andrew and say she wasn't going through with the plan. When she and Paul finally got to the park, she didn't see the guys' cars, so she assumed she had successfully called off the plan. As soon as she finished her statement, police arrested her in her hospital gown and took her into custody.
From victim to suspect, 26-year-old Monique Berkley is now charged with the murder of her husband, 46-year-old Paul Berkley. Police say the couple was shot at Millbrook Exchange Park early Sunday morning. Monique was wounded in the shoulder. Investigators also charged 18-year-old Andrew Canty and 18-year-old Latwan Johnson. People who know the family suspect that Monique, seen here at a party with Canty, was involved in a romantic relationship with him while her husband was serving as a reservist in the Middle East. Neighbors say Canty and Johnson were always at the Clayton home while Paul Berkley was out of the country.
The woman at the center of a deadly love triangle is now going to prison for the rest of her life. Monique Berkley originally pleaded not guilty to plotting with a boyfriend to kill her husband, a naval reservist just home from Iraq. But today, she changed her tune. Amanda Lamb is here now with more. Amanda?
David, Monique Berkley was facing the death penalty if she'd been convicted at trial. Now, instead, under this plea deal, she will spend her life behind bars. She cried throughout the entire hearing today as she entered her guilty plea. Almost 2 years after her husband's murder, 27-year-old Monique Berkley made a deal with the state. She confessed to taking part in the murder plot in exchange for life in prison.
So then you say to me that you are, in fact, guilty of the first-degree murder of Paul Sheldon Berkley. Is that correct?
That's what I'm saying, sir.
Is that true?
Yes, sir.
The couple seemed to have a happy marriage. But after Paul Berkley, a naval reservist, was deployed overseas, investigators say his wife started an affair with Andrew Canty, even inviting him to live in the Berkley's Clayton home.
This defendant and Andrew Canty began making concrete plans about how to kill Paul Berkley.
Prosecutors say the plan was for Monique Berkley to lure Paul Berkley to a Raleigh park for a supposed romantic interlude when he was home on leave. Investigators say Canty and a friend, LaTwan Johnson, were also there. Canty shot Paul Berkley in the head and wounded Monique Berkley.
Andrew Canty then shot this defendant in the shoulder. That was a part of the plan so that people would not be suspicious that she was somehow involved in this murder.
Along the way, we looked at the relative culpabilities of each person, the evidence that we had that was admissible against each one, and after consulting with the victim's family, we thought this was an appropriate result.
Investigators speculate Berkley killed her husband to collect insurance money. Andrew Canty pleaded guilty to murder last month in this case and is serving a life sentence. The case against LaTwan Johnson is still pending.
LaTwan, an East Carolina University freshman, took a deal from investigators in exchange for information. He told police that Andrew was the shooter and that he had joined the plot for a $70,000 cut-of-a-life insurance policy. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder for a 23-year prison sentence. 45-year-old Monique Berkley is currently incarcerated at Anson Correctional Institution, a medium custody prison in Polkton, North Carolina. 38-year-old Andrew Canty is currently serving his life sentence in Maury Correctional Institution, a close custody prison in Hookerton, North Carolina. The projected release date for these Tar Heel monsters is death.